Special thanks to my patrons for supporting my channel. Ryan Coogler's Sinners is already one of the best films of the year, and there's so much I want to say about it. Between its stellar soundtrack, its powerhouse performances, the inspired storytelling being brought to life, Michael B. Jordan being the finest man alive, Stack X Daniel fanfiction coming to an archive of our own near you, I could talk about this movie endlessly. And I do really want to talk about it, but also I want to actually get a video out quickly for a change, so I'm going to try to focus for once. And I want to focus on what I took away as Sinners' core theme and how I see the film as a parable of freedom. Also, because it's still in theaters, I don't have as many clips, so forgive me for resorting to looping trailer footage and still images. And also because it's in theaters, spoiler warning, here we go. The movie opens with a brief prologue, describing people throughout history and across cultures who have a gift of music that can bring their communities together, but can also draw the attention of the wicked. This is followed by the main character Sammy pulling up to his father's church, bloodied, broken guitar in his hand. His father implores him to drop the guitar, to renounce his sinful music-loving ways, and to devote himself to God. Right away, this establishes the heart of the thematic conflict, and we'll put a pin in that for now, just as the movie does. Because now, we see the 24 hours leading up to that moment. Sammy lives the life of a sharecropper, expected to divide up his time between fieldwork and his father's church. Meanwhile, infamous twins Smoke and Stack roll back into town, having made their fortune working for Al Capone's gang in Chicago. They buy an old mill with the intent of turning it into a juke joint, a place to play the blues, for people to cut loose and have fun. To that end, they split up. Smoke arranges for supplies while Stack collects up their old friends. And for right now, let's focus on Stack's side of this. Besides Sammy, we also see him convince two others directly to join the juke joint, Delta Slim and Cornbread. And at first they both hesitate, for notably similar reasons. Delta Slim retorts that he's already booked for a steady, if poorer paying gig. Why should he risk that over a new establishment that might not stick around? Cornbread is worried about meeting his daily cotton picking quota, providing for his wife. They have each settled into a modest routine and don't want to upset that. So what gets them to change their mind? Stack wins over Delta Slim with the promise of ice-cold Irish beer, a far cry from the corn whiskey he usually gets himself drunk with. Stack deliberately provokes Cornbread, crudely implying his wife will do sexual favors for him if he earns all this money, and then she actually plays along, encouraging him to give up the rest of his day's work to do this gig. They give up what they should be doing, so to say, to instead work the Smokestack Twins joint. And then there's Mary, a woman who very much appears white but has a half-black grandparent. According to the laws of Jim Crow, she is legally black and therefore subject to segregation. And yet, she is an outsider in black spaces, Cornbread briefly stopping her at the door before recognizing her. She married a rich white husband, a move meant to secure a life for her, a safe life, because if she marries a black man, despite her legal status, it would attract a violent reaction. A black man like Stack. They have a history together, and it's clear she still wants to be with him, even if she feels hurt by the way he left her. Stack says it was for her own good, for the reasons I just mentioned, but she was still left brokenhearted. Yet she still comes to the club, arriving without her husband. Hailee Steinfeld's song Dangerous on the soundtrack really sums up her conflict beautifully. Oh, I wish that I could be selfish, but I know what that means, that you would be out there hurting, oh, and I would be free. Why am I so dangerous to you? You know I want to let you in. I know what you want to do. Give me what I want, and don't be protecting me from the things we can't control. Like Delta Slim and Cornbread, she has left her quote-unquote proper life to come here. And what is offered at the Smokestack Twins establishment? Besides the whiskey and Irish beer and Italian wine, there's the blues, a seminal musical genre with its roots deep in Black American culture. Delta Slim tells Sammy, "We brought this with us from Africa." And when Sammy sings the song he wrote, I Lied to You, magic happens. Apparitions of artists from the past and future weave through the crowd, and not just from African-American traditions. The Chows are a Chinese-American couple invited to opening night, and as they join the crowd, we see a performer in traditional Chinese garb appear. Sinner's prologue describes music as a power that can pierce the veil of life and death. I Lied to You shows us what that actually sounds like. There is something very basically human about this scene. And note that while his voice invokes this power, Sammy is not the central character of this performance. It is a collective experience, something that everyone present is part of. In this beautiful moment, Everyone here can be their true selves. Everyone can be free. But this power, just as we were warned, attracts evil. But before we talk about Ramik, we need to rewind and address another cloud hanging over the blues bar. And it involves a very unfortunate historical fact in the United States. Black people are often punished for their success. Delta Slim relays the story of a time he and his friend Rice had been arrested, jailed, and forced to tour around the region playing the blues at the behest of law enforcement. At the very least, they did get paid for this involuntary tour. Delta Slim drank his money away, but his friend intended to take that meager wealth to found a church. Then someone saw him withdrawing that money. The Klan robbed him, accused him of stealing it, and lynched him for it. While it's not explicitly cited, the fictional incident described echoes the very real 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. The Greenwood District had been deemed Black Wall Street, a wealthy black community, and a country that always tells its citizens to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. These people had done exactly that. And for their efforts, over 30 city blocks were destroyed by a white mob. Between this historical background and Delta Slim's story presented in the film, this threat hangs over the entire plot of Sinners. It's perhaps part of the reason Slim and Cornbread hesitate to join with the Smokestack twins at first. And it's very explicitly the reason Stack broke Mary's heart. There's greater incentive to stay in a predictable niche when wanting more out of life comes with the risk of not just failure, but violent opposition for daring to step out of line. It's also the reason why when Ramik the vampire and his two thralls show up, they are turned away. It's not a decision to spite them for the color of their skin. Nobody knows who they are. There's a very real chance that if they even perceive a slight, they'll call for the Ku Klux Klan. And this is where we can finally talk about Ramik, who's intent on getting his hands on Sammy. When Mary volunteers to go out and see his intentions, she is caught and turned. With the trust she already has from the folks inside, she manages to get close to Stack and turn him too. That's where the standoff truly begins. Now, the easiest thing for this movie to do would be to make the conflict evil white vampires versus good black people in the club. But that's not what happens here. Ramik is an Irishman. He's outside the Anglo-Saxon Protestant in-group considered the most privileged in the United States. In their climactic confrontation, Sammy tries to invoke the Lord's Prayer against Ramik, who tauntingly repeats it back to him. And he says, "The men who took his land also put those words in his people's mouth." The British colonization of Ireland is directly referenced, emphasizing Ramik's membership in the out-group. And to further highlight this connection, in the prologue, the Irish Feely are specifically mentioned alongside the African Griot and Choctaw Firekeeper as examples of people with musical power. But something has gone wrong with Ramik. We never really find out where he came from or how he got this way. Sammy says that he's the devil himself. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. Maybe he was a Feely himself in the past. Maybe he was an outcast from his own people. Did another vampire turn him? Or did he originate this curse through some other method? We don't know. We also don't know how much of what he says is genuine. But I think the most honest insight we get into his motivation comes at the very end. He's cornered Sammy. His thralls have free reign over the juke joint. He has no further need to deceive, to convince. And in this moment, he tells Sammy that he wants his songs, he wants his music, he wants that power for himself. And that's reflected in his big musical number, Rocky Road to Dublin. I described already how Sammy's song has a sort of collective feel. Everyone is a part of it, everyone contributes something to that scene. Ramik's song positions him as a central figure in the dance. Everyone runs circles around him. The focus is on him. This isn't enough for him though. He's missing something. And we get a clue to that in another line where he says he can no longer access the memories of his ancestors. He's unable to tap into that spiritual truth that Sammy's able to. That's what he wants. He needs Sammy for. Smoke's wife Annie tells us that vampires are prisoners in their own bodies. They're dead, but the soul cannot escape, instead forced to languish. Look what you get in return for it though. Immortality and power. Smoke in no uncertain terms states in the movie that money is power. So look at the contrast between the sharecroppers looking to pay for their night using the fake script currency meant to keep them tethered to their plantations, and the vampires whose pockets are filled with gold coinage. That could be a whole other axis to examine this movie through, but at the moment I want to just focus on the way it highlights the power differential between Ramik and the rest. And this is where the historical elements invoked in the movie come back into play. If this country doesn't allow black people to succeed, then why try? Ramik says it himself. They won't let you build, they won't let you fellowship. Everything they've created, it'll be taken from them. Sammy is told to give up his music by his father, urging him to devote himself to God and the meager life of a sharecropper. He's told to give up his talents by Ramik in exchange for the comfortably numbed life of a thrall. He's even told to give up his ambitions by Smoke, urging Sammy to avoid the indecent life he and his brother have lived, demanding him to settle in a nearby town of, quote, proper black folks. Sammy's conflict mirrors the choice presented to all the other characters we've talked about so far. And what did we see become of them? Delta Slim gave up his regular gig and he's dead. Cornbread left behind his wife for the hope of extra cash and he's also dead. Mary left behind her husband for one last chance with the true love of her life and she's been turned. Smoke doesn't survive the end of the movie, getting fatally wounded in a confrontation with a clan who, true to Ramik's word, intended on using the juke joint as a trap to kill everyone inside. Their collective choice to break from the daily routine from what's considered proper dooms them all. The only thing Sammy has to do to avoid that fate for certain is to drop the guitar. So, why doesn't he? Why does he ride off on his own, away from his father, away from that town of proper black folk that Smoke told him to go to? Why does he take a gamble on himself and end up in a 6-decade musical career sharing his gift with the world? Because to give up his music would be giving up on his very reason to live. It's like the song Can't Win for Losing says in one verse, if I'm unholy when I'm whole and happy in my soul, when it's my time to go, I'm a lost cause for sure. And this theme is reiterated clearly in a mid-credits scene, and Stack and Mary reunite with Sammy all that time later. And Stack makes him an offer. He'll turn Sammy, painlessly without horror. But Sammy still declines. He's lived a long life on this earth, and that's enough for him. So instead, Stack asks him to sing again, and Sammy obliges, playing the same song he had for Stack in the car 60 years ago. Before they part, Sammy shares one last thing, perhaps the most important moment in the movie. That night at the juke joint continues to traumatize him all these years later, and yet, he also calls it the best day of his life. And Stack responds he feels the same way. It was the last time he saw his brother, and the last time he saw the sun. Because earlier in the movie, when Smoke was waffling on whether to delay the opening of the club, Stack looked up at the sunny sky and said, "Mighty fine day to be free." What more perfect metaphor for the cursed power of a vampire than an immortal who can never feel the warmth of sunlight again? So many of their friends died that night, it's true, but it was the first time many of them had truly lived in years. Delta Slim got to taste the finest drink he'd had in forever. Cornbread got to break his routine and see his friends again. Mary and Stack ended up together for the rest of their immortal lives. Smoke reunited with his wife and baby in the afterlife. Whatever horror transpired that night, for a few hours, they were their authentic selves. They were free, and wasn't that worth dying for?